All right, so welcome back to another episode of Bleep. My contribution here is something that is, the schizophrenic ramblings of what's the name, Matthew McConaughey's character in True Detective, but equally valid and legitimate. Yeah, Rust Cole. Um, because there is this is the case that like I've only delved on one level and probably will come back to later on in the show, but I think it's topical because it's kicked off recently again. India, Canada, Sikh nationalism, and the nuclear program of India. So, first of all, on June 18th, 2023, a Sikh man in Surrey, British Columbia, Sikh being the religion, not the physiology,
We're with
just to
you.
clarify. You pronounce it Sikh, right? It's Sikh. It's not Sikh. Because I know people say Sikh, but it's supposed to
Oh,
be Sikh.
I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. They certainly
I'll
say
say
Sikh in South Africa.
okay. I'll say Sikh then. I'll say Sikh. Let me start this again because I don't know. I don't know.
Don't get us yelled at. Whatever you think is the right one.
Yeah. See, as someone Indian, I can confirm it's pronounced thick, like
Is
sick, the illness.
sick, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll do that so we don't get yelled at. Okay. So on June 18th, 2023, a Sikh man, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, was shot to death outside of a gurudwara in Surrey, British Columbia. Nijjar was 45 years old. He owned a plumbing business and was also president of the Gurudwara that he was shot outside of. But he was also an advocate of Khalistan. For those of you who are not familiar, Khalistan is a movement that advocates for a Sikh state in India. So he was a Sikh nationalist. And for that reason, he was a wanted man in India. And he had been organizing a referendum among the diaspora in Canada to vote for a Sikh state, a homeland. Now, a few weeks later in September, the Canadian government publicly comes out and accuses India of orchestrating this hit, like the Indian government, specifically the RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, which is the India's version of the CIA.
The
And
research analysis wing.
yeah, I love when intelligence agencies have very like
Raw.
so yeah
Yeah.
yeah like
One
the
of South Africa's biggest exports is a mercenary company called Executive Outcomes.
yeah very yeah so cool that when their names are like that. But also I hate that India is called Raw and Pakistan didn't have a chance to call their SmackDown. You know. But India's actually, to be fair, India's like Raw are quite terrifying in their own way. Like they're pretty, like as far as intelligence agencies go, they're very fucking formidable. And what's interesting is that apparently the evidence that Raw was involved, to the extent that the Canadian government has the evidence, it sat on it for weeks before publicizing it, and it came out later that the Canadian government basically had to like nag the Americans to be allowed to publicize it because the Americans didn't want to fuck up what's it called, the AUKUS and the
Five
India
Eyes.
the Five Eyes. On the one hand, the Five Eyes. On the second hand, AUKUS. And on the third hand, the Quad or the Triad or whatever they're making.
Yeah, the
Quad.
quad. Yeah,
Yeah,
the Asian
yeah,
kind of like. Was it?
anti-China bloc.
Anti-China bloc, yeah.
Yeah, and to be fair, the evidence came from the Five Eyes. It certainly didn't come from CSIS because of if there were Five Eyes, Canada is like the blind eye. It's like completely useless. CSIS are a fucking joke. CSIS is the Canadian CIA. It's called Canadian Security and Intelligence Services. But this is, funnily enough, this is not the first time a Sikh Khalistani nationalist was killed. On July 14th, 2022, just a year before Najjar was killed, Ripudaman Singh Malik was also found shot to death in his car. And what's interesting about Malik is that in May 2005, he was found not guilty in a Canadian court of involvement in the Air India bombings on June 23, 1985. And the Air India bombings are a big part of this story, because we're gonna end on that note, and how the Air India bombing was essentially blowback, if not more, in the relationship between India, Canada, and Khalistan. But to understand this, first we need to go back to nuclear technology. On July 16th, 1945, Trinity exploded in the Los Alamos facility in the US, which essentially was the day that started the nuclear age. Now, for decades, there's been theories about splitting the atom. If you can split the atom, you could unleash this energy, this unbelievable amount of energy. But it took World War II and the scientists in America under J. Robert Oppenheimer, and the Manhattan Project, to apply the theory and realize the practical sense that you can split the atom. And from that came two bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man. Little Boy was fueled by uranium-235 and Fat Man by plutonium-239. The important thing to understand, and just for historical reference, Little Boy was the one dropped in Hiroshima and Fat Man in Nagasaki. But the important thing to understand is that plutonium-239 only exists in nature in very trace amounts, because plutonium-239 is a byproduct of uranium half-life. When uranium decays, the neutrons that it emits hit other uranium, specifically uranium-239. And when the neutrons hit uranium-239, it forms an element with atomic number 239, which is plutonium. Now, what's interesting about plutonium is that it has a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy you could use. The Fat Man bomb had more energy per kiloton than, in terms of kilotons, than Little Boy. But here's one of those fun little pub quiz questions. What was the second country in the world to develop a self-sustaining nuclear reaction outside of the United States?
Was it Pakistan?
Well, if I say USSR, it goes bah, right?
Yeah, you'd think it's the Soviet Union, because you imagine the Soviets, because they were the second to develop the bomb. But the first self-sustaining nuclear reaction happened in Canada, outside of the United States.
Good Lord.
It was a joint British-Canadian project called Zero Energy Experimental Pile that was a sort of, it was happening during the war, but the reaction didn't happen until September 1945, so they didn't get criticality until September. Criticality is when the nuclear reaction can sustain itself. You don't have to keep inputting energy to get energy out.
So is it an aggressively nice nuclear bomb if it was in Canada?
Just don't ask its opinion about Native Americans. That's all I'll say. The facility is in Chalk River, which is about 100 miles northwest of Ottawa. And that became a sort of heart of the Canadian nuclear program, which I know you joke that Canadians are nice, but just ask the natives or the Haitians or the Somalis about Canada. It's interesting because Canada's always been a sort of we were doing it for peace, right? And to that point, in July of 1947, on July 22nd to be specific, Canada starts its nuclear program with the National Research Experimental Reactor. Now, ZEEP was purely, a very small reactor. Then NRX, the National Research Experimental, had the potential to become commercial, which it eventually does. The model, this is important, it uses natural uranium, which is the uranium you find, naturally occurring in the world, which is a combination of different isotopes, U-238 and U-235 mainly, with other isotopes and trace amounts. It's 99.2% U-238 and 0.7% U-235. The reason that this is important is because U-238 it's not fissile. It's fertile but not fissile. What that means is that you could use it in reactions, but it does not in and of itself able to create a nuclear reaction, right? Now, this is important, when we go to, for example, when people talk about Iran, right? What do they mean when they say Iran is enriching uranium? Uranium-235 is the fissile uranium. And that exists, like I said, natural uranium, 0.7% of natural uranium is U-235. So in order to create fissile uranium, you have to enrich it. Now, Canada's reactor So the technology is such that it can be fueled by natural uranium, unlike, for example, other reactors or even the bomb. The bomb, you need to have a much higher ratio of U-235 to U-238, right? That's what the Iranians are doing when they enrich uranium. They want more U-235 by percentage in the uranium versus U-238, which it's not a bomb level uranium. And the reason the Canadian reactor is so important is because it can be fueled on natural uranium alone. You don't have to do any enrichment. You could just put the fucking uranium in there and it works. And the reason that works is because they use heavy water instead of regular water or graphite. The Soviet reactors, for reference, use a lot of graphite. That's a big Soviet technology.
A big plot point, spoiler alert, in the Chernobyl series on HBO, the graphite tips in the nuclear reactor,
Yeah, when they find the graphite outside of the fucking reactor, which is how they realize that it went into meltdown.
Yeah, and the fault of the design was that when they put the rods back into, they'd lowered the power in order to simulate an accident. And then when they tried to raise it by putting the uranium rods back, the fuel rods back into the reactor, the tips were graphite. So it had the opposite effect of what they thought it was going to. And that's what made it into a bomb, basically.
Yeah. So because graphite, the purpose of graphite in nuclear reactors is to slow down neutrons. But in the way they were designed in Chernobyl, it had the reverse effect. The American reactors use light water for the most part, which is regular water. But heavy water, which is water where the hydrogen is a hydrogen with a neutron in it. Regular hydrogen doesn't have a neutron in it. A hydrogen with neutrons in it is called deuterium. And when H2O has the hydrogens of the H2O have a neutron in them, they're called D2O, deuterium oxide. And that's the presence of heavy water allows the natural uranium to create the neutrons are slow enough to create the nuclear reaction.
So very quickly, just a dumb question. Does Canada have a lot of natural uranium?
It has some amount, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was just wondering. Yeah, no, I think Australia and China has most of it.
Yes, but Canada has enough to sustain itself and to export. But the export is not as big as Australia, China, and the Sahel. 5 to 10% of natural uranium is in, I think, Niger or Chad, one of the two.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Which is where all of the French nuclear program is entirely provided by the Sahel, essentially.
Oh, bloody hell.
Yeah.
No wonder they want to get rid of the French.
Apparently it's Australia, Kazakhstan, Canada, and then Niger has 5%, but so does South Africa, and Namibia and Russia have 8%. So, if I hadn't Googled, I would have sworn it was DR Congo. But
I've read
Australia.
No, uranium. Congo doesn't have as
cobalt.
much. Cobalt, not uranium. Yeah, I read. I don't know if you know about this, Sip, and if you do, I would love to hear what you think, because I've read reports that I'm not quite sure if I trust, that a lot of the uranium that Israel got for its nuclear program came from apartheid South Africa, because there is uranium.
100%, yes. It was basically an exchange. Technology came this way, and
uranium,
uranium went that way.
Yeah.
We can unpeel that onion down the line
in another episode. Yeah. That's a whole other tangent to go down on. But Canada has some significant amounts of natural uranium, and we use it primarily for because Canada has a lot of nuclear power plants. But also we export to countries, and we'll get into with India. We export to countries that we believe are using it for peaceful purposes. But the line there is so fucking thin,
Yeah, it's laughable.
But the thing about natural uranium is it doesn't have enough fissile. In theory, it doesn't have enough fissile materials for a bomb. It doesn't work for light water. Only needs heavy water, which again is also important because, for example, and we'll get into it later, in India's program, they had to import heavy water because heavy water you have to sort of synthesize in a lab, right?
Yeah. So either it's not naturally occurring at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So deuterium oxide is and we'll get into it with India. They imported it from America, which was back in the 60s and 70s. It was hilarious because Americans otherwise hated India because they were pro-Pakistan. The Indians were close to the Soviets. We'll get into this later. In the meantime, Canada's nuclear program, goes online. There's power plants being built. The NRX model of reactor that uses uranium and heavy water is very much coveted by the rest of the world because of it's very efficient. It produces a lot of wattage. in the meantime, in 1951, a bunch of Commonwealth countries gather in Colombo in Sri Lanka, modern day Sri Lanka, previously called Ceylon. It's attended by the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, as well as India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And it's the Colombo Plan develops a sort of social and economic framework to economically develop the South Asian countries, right? It was a way for the Commonwealth to try and hedge their bets and try to get the countries out of the Soviet orbit, especially India. And one of the way they sort of like tried to get India to like not fully commit to the Soviet bloc, to sort of be a third world country, third world in the classic sense, I mean.
Yes, I follow.
Yeah, is to offer nuclear technology. So the first were the British, who offered light water reactor, and then the Canadians offered their heavy water reactor under Prime Minister Louis Saint Laurent, who was a liberal, who offered the technology to build an NRX model in India, which becomes the second nuclear reactor to go online in India in 1960. In 54, the technology was transferred. It does not get built until 1960. It's called CIRUS, the Canada-India Reactor Utility Services. The important part is that the reactor is provided by Canada.
Just out of interest, why did the US let Canada have that one? I mean, exporting your nuclear technology is extremely lucrative. It's not small change.
This happened after the Eisenhower Atoms for Peace initiative. And Canada was a good way of being an interface with countries that might not interact with America directly. With India's case, it's because they're friendly enough with the Soviets and they don't want to piss off the Soviets because the Soviets are supplying their military. So they wouldn't want to interact with too much. There was interaction, which is where the deuterium comes in. The actual heavy water is provided by the Americans. But the reactor
technology is a convenient middleman.
Exactly, which is to bring it back to what's happening right now. I always find it funny when Americans say they want to annex Canada. It's like, it's not in your best interest to annex Canada. Having us is a good way of having plausible deniability. Yeah. We're your fucking bag man. You don't.
They're your alibi, dude. Yeah.
We get to address the CEO of Huawei, and we look like idiots. And you're like, oh well, it's not us. It's But yeah, it's empire, sort of like the Alzheimer's empire, is just declining, and it's just doing things that are self-destructive, which includes annexing Canada.
I'm sorry, I'm putting that in the back pocket. That's great. Alzheimer's empire.
You keep that. So India is allowed to set up its own native uranium processing facilities. So like they have some natural occurring uranium deposit that they could mine. They're not yelled at for that, as long as the technology remains supervised by Canada and the DTO comes from the US. But in secret, and this is where things get messy, in 1958, Nehru authorizes what's called Project Phoenix, which is repurposing the nuclear waste from the CIRUS reactor to plutonium-239. Now, what you need to understand is when reactors produce a lot of radioactive waste, in order to transfer the uranium-238 in the waste to plutonium-239, you just have to bombard it with neutrons. You bombard it with neutrons, it turns into plutonium. And this was done secretly under the Indian Atomic Energy Association, the IAEA, which is going to be very fucking confusing in this episode because you have the International Atomic Agency, which is also the IAEA. So with this one, I'll just call it the Indian AEA. Okay? Now, things in the 60s sort of hum along. There's not a lot of, upside down politics going on, at least in the subcontinent, until the 1971 Indo-Pakistan War. Actually, no, I lied. In the 60s, there was an Indo-Chinese war as well, and the Chinese washed the Indians, but we don't want to talk about that because I don't want to get, raw on my knocking on my door. So, just
guys, we're going to get yelled at so much.
Yes.
I'm
getting yelled at. I don't get shot. I'm too young and pretty to get shot.
I'm being super,
Yeah. Which is where there's certain parts where I'm going to dance around certain things later on, with Khalistan in particular.
We're all going to learn to do that.
Yeah. In 71, the Indo-Pakistan War occurs. It's an extension of the Bangladeshi War of Independence when India sort of jumps in and supports Bangladesh against Pakistan. Now, this is where we have Kissinger and Nixon excellence, because, Kissinger calls Indira Gandhi that Indian bitch. The US decides to support Pakistan in the genocidal war against Bangladesh. And when India jumps in to support Bangladesh at the tail end of the war in December of 71, the Americans send a nuclear armed carrier force into the Bay of Bengal to threaten the Indians. In return, the Soviets send in their nuclear submarine to tail the Americans. This is one of those very high era of if nuclear war could have happened, it would have happened then and there, because everyone was nuclearly
all the
armed
puzzle
and pissed
pieces
off.
were there.
Yeah, but with that, one of the two consequences of the war. I mean, first of all, there was no nuclear war. Thank God, we're all still here, and the nukes didn't fly. But there's two things that war engendered. First, it pushed Pakistan under Zulfikar Ali Bhutto at the time to support Khalistan, which is the Sikh national separatist movement in India, the Indian Punjab, because it was like an eye for an eye. You encourage separatism in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, we will encourage separatism in Indian Punjab. The second consequence is India realized the awesome power of nuclear weapons, awesome again in the classical sense, and realized we need to have nukes ourselves, because if the Americans can just show up with a nuclear carrier force, if it wasn't for the Soviets, we would have had to pull back from supporting Bangladesh. Like, it only took another external nuclear actor to support us. So they decide to fully pursue the nuclear. The thing is, in the 60s, I know I fast forwarded it, but there was steps being made by the Indian AEA that could conceivably be seen as pursuing a nuclear weapon, but they were always making sure to step right before the line, right? It was theoretical technology, theoretical analysis of blowing switches and what would happen, what kind of material would the bomb be, and so on. But it was never we're going to test a bomb. 71 was when we have to test a bomb. And the bomb test was nicknamed Smiling Buddha, which I think is hilarious.
Smiling Buddha, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah, the episode notes I put for this is called Smiling Buddha, Hidden Six. But yes, which is I think would be a good episode title. I think.
Roll with it.
But they called it the Smiling Buddha, and they put their best minds to work on it. And when Indira Gandhi became prime minister, she went all in on this, right? So in the Smiling Buddha, after years of work, culminates on 18th of May 1974, a successful nuclear explosion in the Pokhran mountain range in Rajasthan. And that's the first time a non-Security Council country gets a nuke. It's the Indians. And this is where things go completely off the rails. I mean, besides the fact that having a nuke in of itself was completely considered bad, the plutonium that was used in the test of the bomb was the plutonium that was extracted and processed from the Cyrus reactor. And the Canadians lost their fucking shit, because the whole point was supposed to be peaceful technology, just power. And this was a big egg on the face of the Canadians under Pierre Elliott Trudeau at this point. They freeze all nuclear technology exchange with India. They freeze a lot of nuclear resources exchange, so uranium. And they also, Canada leads the way in what's called the London Group, or the Nuclear Supplier Group, which is established months after the bomb goes off. And it's a group of countries that have nuclear technology, both bomb and power, or countries that have nuclear material. So uranium mining in particular is a big ding, 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 ding. You have to, And initially it was only at a dozen countries, and now it's 28. But the point was to establish guidelines for the export of nuclear technology and uranium. And the interesting thing about the NSG is that it was a backdoor for countries that would otherwise not have signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to get on board a system of not exporting technology to other countries. The big one was France, because France was not part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty at the time. And having the NSG allowed France to join and dictate they basically established guidelines for the export of uranium, where if certain amounts are exported, if certain ratios of isotopes are found in a recipient country, IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, safeguards would be put in place, and the framework would end up becoming what would be the way in which sanctions are applied to North Korea and Iran in particular. Yeah.
Why was France not a signatory? Like, did they want to do something differently, or why were they?
The French were so weird after World War II, and then also after, and then also at the end of the Soviet Union, where they'll be like, "Let's disband NATO," or like just like,
well,
we're all
not just the end of the Soviet Union. It's not just the end of the Soviet Union with NATO. There's a lot. The French are really interesting. I don't want to get into a lot of big. This is like a big rabbit hole we could do. But
we could.
When Charles de Gaulle discovered that Gladio was being set up in like the NATO countries, one of the big reasons NATO, people don't realize this, but NATO's original headquarters wasn't Brussels, it was Paris. De Gaulle kicked them out of Paris after there were arguments over Gladio and like the extent to which Gladio would be allowed. De Gaulle is one of those very enigmatic figures that like he sort of, I mean, he can be hilariously stupid sometimes, but he has a weird Napoleonic energy of like synthesizing right and left, like being both loved and hated by right and leftists. Like, I mean, obviously, like the generals wanted to kill him a few times, like the far right generals because of Algeria. But at the same time, he hated the communists, so like he wasn't never going to be like he
was a staunch anti-communist.
We kind of had that Juan Perón thing going on.
Yes, very Perón-like. I mean, part of that was like, zigging when everyone else zags and zagging when everyone else zigs. So like part of that was France choosing not to be part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty because de Gaulle didn't want to be part of that sort of like, being hectored and harangued by the Americans, essentially. And there's a whole, like, the French nuclear program is a whole other, like, kettle of fish. Like I can go into, like, the French, the nuclear reactor in Iraq was supplied by the French. The French were the ones who were providing Saddam with the nuclear technology.
Yeah.
Back when Saddam was their pal, Well,
de Gaulle was so pissed at FDR because at the end of World War II, everything America started doing was in the name of anti-imperialism. They were like, oh, we're, building this new anti-imperial world, non-imperial world. And he kept like constantly hauling de Gaulle over the coals for all the shit they were doing in Indochina. And it was always his example. And then the funny thing was once France had gotten out and stuff, and once the US decided to like start getting into Vietnam, de Gaulle's like, oh, that's horrible. You shouldn't do that. Like, no one should go into Indochina. That's a terrible idea.
Well, that's the thing. I kind of like respect him in a deep way where I'm like, that's an operator. That's a guy who knows how to, like, again, zig when they zag when he floats like a butterfly. He stings like a fucking bee.
Yeah.
Like the way in which he survived 1968 and like the whole, like, because like he was getting like the generals were gonna kill him for Algeria. Like they were planning to fucking murder him, and he just like dissolves parliament, fucking absolves a constitution, creates a new republic just to like get rid of the fucking pied noir psychopaths in the government. The what's it called, the jackals or something? The whole thing is so weird. But yeah, France was its own thing, but they did agree to the NSG, and I think they had selfish reasons as well because the NSG allowed them to control the uranium export to the Sahel. Their new colonial empire over there, right? Like using the NSG to
of course,
severely monitor the uranium of the Sahel. But while all of this is happening, right, India is being broken up like a pizza, like I genuinely do think one of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century was partition.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Not just in terms of the immediate violence that it engendered, the trains of people being massacred, like going into India and into Pakistan, like an eye for an eye violence, the rapes, the pillaging, the looting, but the idea that it legitimized the principle that you can't have a national identity, that your sectarianism, your religious identity had to come first. The idea that, because basically India was divided because the Muslim League under Jinnah proposed this concept. And don't get me wrong, I can see why they thought this way, right? This is one of those like classic legacies of the British divide and conquer mindset. When you reinforce ethnic or sectarian identities, all it does is create fears that when the British leave, there will be a bloodbath. So in Jinnah's case, his argument was, if the British leave and we have an Indian republic, the Muslims will never be a majority in this country, right? Statistically speaking, there'll be a significant minority, but not a majority, because the Hindus will always be a majority there.
Right.
So instead of having a confederational republic with autonomy in provinces or some sort of national identity that transcends sect, like we're all Indian as a country, his argument was like, no, we have to split the Muslim majority provinces and form a separate country that is for Muslim subcontinental. But what that also meant was that the Sikhs now looked at that and said, well, if you want your own country, we want a country too. And they proposed Khalistan. The name Khalistan first comes in response to the Muslim League's Lahore resolution in 1940, which proposed a Muslim country. And so they said, okay, we want Khalistan, and the base level would be Indian Punjab. But you have as with all national movements, you have the irredentists and the maximalists who are like, would just add more and say this used to be ours and now it has to be ours now. So Greater Khalistan actually includes Indian Punjab, Pakistani Punjab, and parts of Chandigarh, Haryana, and Himachal Pradesh. Like, it's quite a significant portion of land. But Khalistanism never really took root among the Sikh peoples in the region until later, until the 70s. And the reason for that is because of the post-partition Indian government's sort of behavior with regards to, first of all, defining what the provinces are of Punjab, Chandigarh, and Haryana. And subsequent to that, water rights. Again, it all goes back to these like very local needs, right? A lot of these Sikh people in the Punjab are farmers, and India used the central government of India sort of overrides autonomous provinces or states to dam rivers and draw rivers elsewhere to other provinces. And the Sikhs saw that as like them being targeted, right? Now, the Sikhs also had a big diaspora, right? In fact, another pub quiz question is, as a percentage of a national population, Canada has the highest percentage of Sikhs, even more than India.
Yeah.
In India, 1.7% of the people are Sikh. In Canada, it's 2.1%. And they mostly came in the 60s and 70s. But again, minimal support for Khalistan at this moment, right? Like, you have your extreme, but they're a fringe movement. Now, during this time, there's the minority in the diaspora, and this is where things get like very Gladio-esque, for militant groups. The two big ones in Canada are the Khalistan Commando Force, KCF, and the Babar Khalsa. The Khalsa is led by a guy named Talwinder Singh Parma, who was active in militant Khalistani circles in the 60s, moves to Canada in the 70s as a young boy, becomes a Canadian citizen, and joins the Babar Khalsa, while also being a member of something called the Kant Kirtani Jatha. And again, if I'm pronouncing things wrong, sue me. But
I think 1.5 billion Indians should all descend on your two dimensions at once.
1.5 billion Indians and 5,000 Chinamen. Okay. I'm sorry. That's gonna be one of those phrases where like the DMT is hitting my brain. I can see the tunnel at the end of the road, and all I can think of is like my grandkids are like, Grandpa, what are you smiling at? And I'm like, how much I love your grandmother. And in my head it's like 5,000 Chinamen.
We need to get a soundboard. Actually, I should get my boyfriend to make it. Of like, yeah, and just have like George Galloway saying 5,000 Chinamen.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, I wonder how many Chinamen were involved in the Indo-Chinese War, but we should ask George. We should bring George and talk to him about the Indo-Chinese War here. But anyways, yeah, the AKJ was the sort of militant youth wing of the Akali Dal, which is like the Sikh party in the Punjab. And this is the party that sort of, again, most of these parties have like your Mensheviks and your Bolsheviks within them, like the maximalists who want pure, like, we gotta fight now, and the guys who want, like, reform. And in 72, this sort of internal contradictions come to a head with the loss of election in the Punjab. That they've lost so much legitimacy, not achieving any Sikh autonomy, that they lose a bunch of provincial elections. So in response, they proposed the Anandpur Sahib resolution, which includes demands for devolved state powers from the central government to the different provinces. Specifically, they want Punjab because they know they're a majority in Punjab and can win elections there, as well as the recognition of Sikhs as a separate religion. But crucially, the resolution at that point still does not call for an independent national homeland. It's still shying away from the maximalist demands. And then also a bunch of issues with regards to water rights, and the return of Chandigarh, which is a province that was carved out of the Punjab, to the Punjab. So the Chandigarh is the crucial one, really. But this sort of, there's negotiations between the government under Indira Gandhi and the Sikh parties. Nothing really happens until 1982, when an enterprising young man by the name of Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale joins Akali Dal. And within the Akali Dal, he forms the Dharam Youth Morcha, which is like this militant group that advocates for, let us say, strategies that would be of tension in the country, ramp up the temperature, very Spears of the Nation, idea, right?
Yeah.
And this includes things like strikes, which included the attempts to disrupt the Delhi Olympics in 1982 by going on strike. The Indian government cracked down hard on that. That's really where the militant movement began, because when initially no one listened to Bhindranwale because they're like, you're just a troublemaker. You're the guy who likes AK-47, like imagery, but we don't really want to be involved in this. But then the approach to try and use strikes for the Delhi Olympics, what the Indian government did, was block all migration between Delhi and the Punjab, and any migration coming into Delhi, you had to be like stopped and frisked like a dozen times. And this was especially done to visibly Sikh people. And you could see because they wear the turban.
Yes.
It's a very visible minority. And the humiliation of that pushed a lot of people to support Bhindranwale and his Dharam Morcha, to the point where the Akali Dal, which at that point has been a reformist party, invites him to establish his headquarters in the Golden Temple, which is the sort of preeminent holy site in Sikh faith, right?
Yes,
it's located in the city of Amritsar, and
that's
it's
like very pointed.
Yeah.
By the way, this is very ANC in the 1930s and 40s. People like Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, I'm going to forget the third person, are basically saying this Christian Democrat write letters to the editor, bullshit isn't working, we need to fight. And basically turning the ANC into a militant left-wing organization.
Well, John says this in Radio Warner, and it's a very common historical thing where every insurgency, every national liberation movement, whatever you want to call it, has to go through the two phases: the peaceful phase where everyone is humiliated, degraded, people's families are getting killed, and then the sort of grit your teeth and pick up the rifle phase. But you need a certain level of the peaceful phase to rile people up enough to embrace the struggle, right? Because the struggle is not easy. Once you embrace the struggle, another thing John said that I really appreciate is once you accept armed insurgency, you take a photo of your family and you X out the faces of 9 out of every 10 of your loved ones, because that's who the state is coming after.
I remember that quote.
Yeah, but they know where your grandma lives down in the village, and they're going to be a knock on her door, and we're going to find out how many nails she can live without.
Yeah,
and that was classic. That's classic coin doctrine. And the Indian government was even before the armed struggle. The Indian government was treating the Sikh national movement as an insurgency, so they were applying coin. And the post Delhi Olympics humiliation is what created this upswell in support to the point where again, like Bindranwale being invited to form his like team in the Golden Temple is imagine if a political party invited Bin Laden to establish himself in Mecca, in the Kaaba. Like they're like, okay, the Kaaba is now your office. Like this is how because to the point where Bindranwale, there was an arrest warrant for him by the Indian government, but they were, once he was in the Golden Temple, he was practically untouchable until 1984, which is Operation Blue Star, where things just go completely off the rails. So he established himself in the Golden Temple at the invite of the Akali Dal, the reformist leaders who realized they need to increase the temperature. And he starts two things: a campaign of what the Indian government called terrorism. Now, whether it is or not is, the eye of the beholder. But there was part of Bindranwale's strategy was create enough violence that Hindus at large, will emigrate out of the Punjab. He was doing population one of his objectives was population transfer. We can't deny that, as much as people see him as a martyr or a hero. So car bombs, assassinations of figures, street violence. This was like a very, very much Italy in the 70s, or this was very aggressive stuff. And the other thing he was doing was building parallel power. So for Sikh Punjabis, instead of going to the Indian government to adjudicate disputes, whether it's like you and the local villager down the road or divorce proceedings, you go to the Golden Temple and he sits on your disputes and he offers you justice immediately right there and then. So he's creating legitimacy for himself as a parallel state. I know there's a lot of fucking hilarious Twitter accounts today talk about parallel power. They have no idea what that means. A lot of Twitter anarchists love that fucking phrase, but this guy was doing parallel power. Yeah. He was doing a state besides a state, essentially, because really one of the core raisons d'être for a state is providing justice. You own monopoly on legitimate violence. A farmer comes to you and says, so and so down the street stole my cattle, or I want to divorce my wife or whatever. Your legitimacy as a state is that you're the one who they come to and you say, okay, this is what happens. If he's sitting there and people come to him instead of you, well, what the fuck are you there for then?
Yeah.
And he's backing it up, obviously, with armed power. He has the armed movement, the Khan Kirtani Jatha. And also another important thing to note, again, with insurgencies, the moderates will get targeted, or the reformists, because they are seen as traitors to the cause, right? So a big portion of the victims in this violence from 1982 to 1984 are a group of Sikhs that are sort of seen as heretics by this militant group for both not being conservative enough on a religious level, like they're more liberal in terms of reforming the religion, but also more open to the idea of negotiating with the Indian state. And the fact that they're not as conservative on the religious levels, more secular, lack of a better word, meant that they became victims of car bombs, of shootings, and so on. Now, he's doing this for 2 years, and it's sort of low-level insurgencies increasing in temperature until Indira Gandhi just decides to put the hammer down, right? And there's a lot said on who did what where. Now, and I'm going back to the Canadian involvement, there's a lot of money coming into the Sikh Khalistani movement in India from Canada. Canada is one of the biggest fundraisers. And India has long accused the Canadian government of harboring terrorists and sponsoring terrorists.
Yeah.
Did they? We don't know. There's a lot of documents in CSIS were shredded in the 90s. And there's a lot of because of the Air India bombing, there's a lot of omerta because it was blowback, right?
Big black lines through
redacted, records were not found, suspicious fires in office buildings just before digitization. Classic stuff,
Yeah. Hey, so just quickly, so were the Sikh population going to Canada, were they just was it sort of general migration, or were they sort of taken in as refugee, or targeted people?
Targeted refugee status, much like the Pahlavi monarchists, the post.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Again,
so that explains a lot of the enmity, right?
Yeah, Canada, everyone loves to talk about Canada. The sort of marketing slogans we have here are that we're a cultural mosaic and that we encourage immigration. And like everyone learns to live with everyone. We have all these different cultures and the people can keep their cultures. If you like the Iron Cross because your granddad wore it in 1942, you get to
Yeah.
keep it if you want.
Well, he personally made
The
Jews
fa-
dance for 48 hours until they fell over and beat them to death. Like, yeah.
Yes,
Well,
your granddad was part of that. We love that.
Yeah.
No, but I'm joking, but it's real. Like what's really insidious about Canadian immigration is that for a long time it was targeted immigration, and they could do that because of pure geography, right? In order to get to Canada, you either have to fly into the U.S., which is notoriously difficult to do, or get on a boat, which is also notoriously difficult to do. Like, there's no land border that you could sort of sneak into. Like, you won't have a southern border the way the Americans have a southern border. So this targeted immigration pipeline meant that you get like all sorts of like psychotic reactionaries. In the case of, post-war era, we had the Croatians and the Ukrainians for the most part, and they were brought in here to quell domestic labor unrest. So the Ukrainians that used to be here from before the war were all communists. So they brought in the Nazis to like basically become Pinkertons and break strikes and burn down labor halls. The Pahlav is obviously very obvious, get the Iranian monarchists in here. The Khalistanis aren't really as reactionary. They're a different, I wouldn't, like, as much as the Indian government hates them, I wouldn't put them in the level of like the Ustasha or the Pahlavi Savat guys, right?
Yeah.
They do have I'm not a big like ethno-nationalist guy, but they do have reasonable concerns about the Indian government and the status of Sikhs within the Indian, state as the polity as it is.
Yeah, sorry, I traveled in India, and I'm about to do the conversation with the cab driver thing.
The Thomas Friedman special.
Yeah. But the Hindu nationalism is so overt that I was traveling with like 30 South Africans from very different backgrounds and so on. But we were gobsmacked. Like, we were in Hyderabad at first in the south, so not anywhere near Punjabi state, but there must have been, I'm sorry about being this vague, there must have been some kind of an election either coming or just passed. So in South Africa, you would see posters, on street poles or whatever, and it would be, all like at least the big parties, the same street pole will have like 6 or 7 party posters, and there's that obvious sense of egalitarian democracy, right? And when you go there, and I remember saying to people, just point out how many Muslim party posters you can see. Like, and it's not hard to tell. It's really not.
Yeah.
Because the Hindutva parties are so like, especially the ruling party. So yeah, and it has, and we were, we challenged them when you asked them questions, and we were like, what's going on here? And because it was a junket basically, they were very like, no, India is a constitutional democracy like South Africa, we guarantee rights, etc., etc., etc. And then you talk to the working class people and you're like, what's going on here? And they're like, yeah, no, we're not having those lot. It's wild. I always worry about sectarianism in South Africa until you go to a country where it's real, where it's actually like life or death real. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the election in India this year where Modi was supposed to like absolutely romp home, and he got a bit of a bath. Like, he was,
right, of course,
it was like way tighter than they thought. Yeah. Anyway.
And Hyderabad is a Congress state. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's like people don't understand. Like, this is something, again, like, it's always fun. I find it funny when, like, Westerners, like, especially white people, but not necessarily, like, even, like, second or third or fourth gen diaspora of different groups, when they're in the West, they tend to absorb the West's conception of race. So, like, race being white, black, Latino, and so on. And they project that elsewhere, and they assume that racism exists elsewhere in the same way that it would exist, in Canada or in America. But it really doesn't. Really, like, I mean, it maybe does to a superficial degree, but, like, the real hatreds are, like, very different forms. So, like, in India, it's Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, right? and then casteism, of course, caste being the other signifier. In the Gulf and parts of the Middle East, it's like Shia or Sunni, Christian or Muslim. It's a lot more narrow than just like, oh, what color skin are you? It's a lot deeper than that. And it goes back to like, was like partition's logic, would India be what it is today if partition didn't happen? It's one of those interesting counterfactuals I like thinking about, because like, okay, if we have an India where Muslims are a significant minority but not a majority, they would be influencing politics in a way in any republican democracy where like, coalition parties and so on, they would find a way to influence through being part of some sort of coalition, because they would govern, they would have enough a percentage to affect some level of influence. But as far as the Sikhs go, I also sympathize, because they're 1.7% of the total population of India, and they're concentrated in the Punjab. So like, it's not even like it's diffuse or anything. But at the same time, like, okay, so suppose once you have a Sikh national, like let's say you have a Republic of Khalistan, then the arguments become, well, what about the minorities in Khalistan? And that's where like someone like Bindranwale, like his solution is cause enough violence that all the Hindus leave. But to be fair, Bindranwale also was advocating for an explicit theocracy. Like his vision of Khalistan wasn't like, because for all of his deficiencies, Jinnah envisioned Pakistan as a Muslim republic that also safeguarded the rights of the minorities. Now that lasted all of 2 years before he died, and everyone was like, "Yeah, we're not doing that anymore. You can fuck off." But once you have like guys who support these kind of causes tend to like take it to its logical conclusion. That's why, like, something like Israel, like it was always going to end up this way, Yeah. Which I'm not saying Khalistan would have become Israel again. Like the argument for ethno-nationalism is very tricky, and it also opens up. Again, going back to this story, it opens up avenues for foreign manipulation. So the trickle of migration into Canada by Sikhs became a flood after 1974, when Smiling Buddha was announced, because the Canadians were pissed off, and they're like, well, we need to have our people in India that we could use to hit back at the Indian state if anything goes haywire, because we're talking about nukes here. So they start bringing in the Sikh diaspora and encouraging the fringe movements, the KCF, the Babar Khalsa, right? And during the 1970s, again, it's a low-level fringe movement. The insurgency is heating up in the early 1980s. And it really, like, in 1982 to 1984, it's like this level of insurgency with support from the diaspora. 1984 is when all hell goes loose. And again, this is one of those things where I would love to go to Moscow and go to the basement of the KGB archives, because how much Indira Gandhi knew and what she knew before authorizing Operation Blue Star is still up to the imagination. I believe it was a Soviet KGB defector, sorry. And I love saying KGB, by the way. I know I'm being pretentious, but I think the Russians are awesome when they say KGB instead of KGB.
You just sound like a teenager who's returned from Paris and is calling it Paris.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Just say KGB. It makes it so threatening.
Just quietly, Russian like communist jokes. I kind of collect them because they're really fantastic. Like all the, just Russian humor, because they're just hilarious people anyway. But there was a joke during the Soviet Union that which building in Moscow has the best view in all of Russia? And they used to say it's the basement of the KBG, the basement of the KGB, because you can see all the way to Siberia from there.
That's good. That's really fucking good. Yeah. That's really fucking good. Yeah, no, so I'll say KGB because I don't want to sound like, you're right. It is it's a bit like, I'm doing the wanker side of myself right now. But it so basically Indira Gandhi, Prime Minister of India, of the Congress, the Indian Congress Party, and the daughter of one of the founders of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, she
Oxford
authorizes,
educated, of course.
Yes, of course. There were rumors that he was fucking Lord Mountbatten's wife. I don't know.
I've read a book about that.
Really?
Yeah. It seems pretty comprehensive. Yeah.
Respect.
She was fucking everyone.
Yeah.
And I think was she fucking Jinnah as well? Was it? She was like friends with him.
She was very close friends, but I don't think Jinnah strikes me as a very sexless guy. He doesn't have the same riz as Nehru.
No riz.
Yeah. No, but Nehru's again one of those like the 20th century gave us a lot of classic guys, capital G guys. They don't make those fellas anymore. They don't, But Indira, for her part, like she authorizes Operation Blue Star. Now, first of all, let's explain what Blue Star is for those of us who don't know. Operation Blue Star was the Indian Army's response to Bhindranwale and the Sikh insurgency, the Khalistan insurgency. He's located in the Golden Temple. The Golden Temple is a no-go zone. It's a holy sanctuary. Essentially, it's a second remake of the Grand Siege, the Grand Mosque siege in Mecca, essentially, where the Indian Army decides to go in and arrest or kill Bhindranwale. Though unofficially, the order was to kill. There was not going to be no arrest.
Did they get the French involved?
Unfortunately, the Indians are more competent than the Saudis. The Indians, for all else, the Indians actually have an army. The army isn't just tribal levies. So unlike the Saudis, they didn't have to. Could you imagine if they had to force the French to convert to Hinduism
before they go? It's like, all right, boys, just
And the French would do it because they're perverts like that. They don't believe in anything. They'll convert to anything you want to.
They don't go with them.
Yeah, so Blue Star is the name of the operation that Indira Gandhi authorizes. It lasts 10 days, June 1st to 10th, and it's essentially an urban battle. The army comes in, the Khalistani insurgents in the Golden Temple complex, which again is like attacking Mecca or the Vatican. They're like holed in with like RPGs. So the Indian government brings in the fucking helicopters and armored vehicles, and it's blowing apart this holy site. Civilians, by the way, June 1st was some sort of holy day for Sikh people, so a significant amount of civilians were there on pilgrimage, which also like parallels with the Grand Siege of Mecca in 79, where the insurgents there, led by Jahiman Latebi, who pick a day where there'll be a lot of pilgrims, except in this time, instead of the people inside picking the day, it's the Indian army picking a day and then accusing everyone of being a human shield. So there were a lot of civilian casualties. Like, they were just cutting through people. And Bhindranwale is killed in this battle. By June 6th, the insurgents' ammo is depleted, and the last 4 days is just mopping up. But here's a lesson for you. If you're authorizing an operation against an explicit nationalist ethnic movement, right? Rule number 1, expel all members of that ethnicity from your Praetorian Guard.
I was going to ask that, because the Sikhs were like always the Praetorian Guard for the Hindu, not Hindu, but for the
Indian prime minister.
Yeah,
because it's a legacy of the Gurkha tradition. It's a legacy of
they're like the guards on airplanes and stuff as well.
Yeah. And guess who Indira Gandhi's presidential personal bodyguards were? Who were thrilled that she was, sending in the fucking tanks into their holy site. Yeah. Again, come on, guys. Does anyone read a manual over here? Like, first thing you do being like, right, I'm going to go attack Mecca. What I'm going to do, I'm going to expel every Muslim from my personal bodyguard because they're going to be fucking pissed off.
Yeah, and it's like the Sikhs are pretty identifiable. Like, they have a way of dressing it. It's kind of,
there's not many crypto Sikhs out there. It's not like, they don't do taqiyya. They don't do taqiyya over there. On the 31st of October 1984, these guys don't fuck around. They don't wait for years. Her 2 Sikh bodyguards shoot her to death. Beyond Singh and Satwant Singh. Fun fact: every year during the Khalsa parade for Sikhs in Toronto, their two faces are plastered onto the vans that lead the parade. Absolutely. They're treated like fucking
they're like the prom king.
Yeah.
But every year,
yeah. They shoot her. They get executed. But also the assassination sparks anti-Sikh pogroms. like the India pogroms, by the way, led by the Congress Party. Like this isn't like, like we're trying to keep it. Congress Party leaders are like, saying things like we have to find them in the houses and kill them all, because a lot of people seem to think that the pogroms are the exclusive domain of the right in India. No, not really. Like the Congress was just as culpable for pogroms against identifiable enemies as the BJP was. It just so happened that for the BJP it's Muslims. For the Congress it was Sikhs. And this is where things get real ugly, because the Sikhs now, the Golden Temple has been invaded in 84. The pogroms are 84 into 85. And there's just clearly like an impasse. In 1985, this impasse, there's an attempt to break this impasse when Rajiv Gandhi, who's, Indira Gandhi's son, and takes over the Congress Party, which is also another thing I kind of like. I do like hereditary party structures, where like, it's not a monarchy, but my son is going to become party leader after me. Respect.
Well, isn't it, you live under one in Canada.
Yeah, but, first it's tragedy, then it's farce, What's that Charles Portis line? We're weaker than our fathers, Dupree. We don't even look like him. Yeah, that's what I see when I look at Justin Trudeau. Also, maybe not his real dad. We don't know.
Fidel.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fidel was a dog, man. He's a dog.
I'm a believer. But Rajiv Gandhi takes over in India in 85. He tries to sign an accord with one of the Akali Dal leaders. His name is Longowal. And the accord is meant to presage further negotiations for more what's the fucking word?
Intransigent.
Intransigent or intractable. For more intractable issues, where the water rights being the ones, right? So like the accord sort of supposed to pave the way, but clearly the water rights both sides are not budging, right? So like, for example, Rajiv offers a Sikh symbolic victory. So like, you're allowed to wear your kirpan in public. Your Sikhism is now an identifiable caste, like a religious group in the census. But the water rights and the transferring of Chandigarh back to Punjab was not going to happen. And this is where things get like ugly and the insurgency reaches a new level. There's assassinations of police officers, of army guys. And in return, of course, classic coin doctrine. Sikh people are being shot. Like, if you get arrested, you might not walk out of the police station. Torture is rife, rape, it's an insurgency, at this point. Yeah. You attack the Golden Temple, what the fuck do you expect? Even the guys who were moderates are not picking up a rifle. And this is where the Canadian involvement, the sort of support for the Babar Khalsa and the fringe movement, or the alleged support, I should say, reaches the sort of height, the climax. On June 23rd, 1985, an Air India plane, Air India 182, typically a Boeing 747 model, it follows the Montreal, London, Delhi, Mumbai route, explodes in midair off the coast of Ireland, off the southern coast of Ireland. And, the immediate assumption of it being an accident are immediately dismissed. They're like, this is a terrorist attack. And it, obviously there's investigations. Everyone's freaking the fuck out. And within months, it is obvious that this is a Khalistan movement attack. Because at the same day, a bomb goes off in Narita Airport in Tokyo, in Japan. It was meant for an Air India flight 301 that goes from Tokyo to Delhi by way of Tokyo, Delhi by way of Bangkok. And in this case, in the second bomb, it blew up and killed the baggage handlers too early, but the first bomb was in the flight. And the story of the smuggling in is kind of really sad, in the sense that the ticket was bought, the guy went in to check in the bag. It was supposed to be an Air Canada flight, or Canada Pacific, which is a defunct air company. He's supposed to go from Canada Pacific from Vancouver to Toronto, CP060, and then in Air India 181 from Toronto to Montreal, and then Air India 182 from Montreal to Bombay via London and Delhi. And he goes to the airport, and his ticket is on standby. He hasn't confirmed his ticket. The Air India ticket 182 isn't confirmed. So he's trying to check in his bag, and the attendee is like, "Sir, you can't check in your bag until the ticket is confirmed." And he's like haggling with her. It's like this local worker, and she sort of takes pity on him and is like, "Fine, I'll check in your bags, but you have to check in again in Toronto, right?" And he gives her the bag, and she checks it in, and he leaves. And that bag goes through the baggage handlers in Toronto, who put it through in Montreal, who then put it through on the plane heading to Bombay. And that the airport baggage lady, she was part of the CSIS investigation and then the inquiry, and she still blames herself to a degree. Like she still thinks that she shouldn't. Yeah,
oh my
both those things
gosh.
are like, and it sucks because like I'm as an Arab, I don't like rules where it's like, oh, you can't check in your bag unless you're confirmed. Like, come on, like be a little leeway, right? But it's one of the things where like this guy obviously was like just gonna harangue her until the bag was the fucking bomb. And I'm gonna go to the investigation after and discuss like some why I believe parts of the Canadian state were involved and why I believe, and again, me believing this, we don't know. There's evidence is murky, but there's a lot of fucking untapped information, vague things. Anyways, the bomb exploded, kills 329 people. Total victims are 331 if you include the 2 people in Tokyo, including 268 Canadians. And the Canadian government is like investigating this. There's a lot of fucking uproar. The Indian government is fucking fuming, and this continued. Funnily enough, after this, the Babar Khalsa sort of disappear. Like there's not really like a lot of more
Interesting.
like yeah. So like
So
there's a
this
lot of
wasn't like a victory moment that they can build on and basically
there were
in the
warrants
way
issued
that
for
Al Qaeda would have done in
yeah,
the
there were no subsequent
80s.
attacks. There was no videos or whatever. The government there was clearly a lot of fucking effort to shut down certain things that were now problematic. I want to say again, this is like I'm on thin ice here, but to give you the what really happened, like the facts. Only again to L's episode, only one person was convicted in this entire plane bombing that killed 331 people, and it was a man named Inderjit Singh Rayat. He was a car mechanic who was allegedly tapped by Talwinder Singh Parmar to build a bomb because he was a car mechanic, and he pled guilty to manslaughter and served 10 years in jail. He pled guilty in 1990, served 10 years in jail, was released, agreed to cooperate with the prosecution of several other people, and his during the testimony he refused to provide any evidence that would be used to convict 2 other Sikh people involved in Babar Khalsa, Ripudaman Singh Malik and Ajay Singh Bagri, sorry. And because of that, he was charged again with perjury and sentenced to 9 years in jail in 2003, the biggest sentence ever given to perjury. He was released in 2016, having served but like partial terms for his sentence.
So what kind of perjury are you talking about? Did he just like straight out like lied, covered up?
Yeah, he was just like, I don't know. I was just doing this alone. I don't know. These people had nothing to do with it. And there was evidence that they did, but the sort of the leader of the Babar Khalsa, Talwinder Singh Parmar, he fled Canada, went back to India, and was allegedly killed sometime in 91 or 92 in a shootout of the Indian police. There was also, before he died, though, interestingly enough, before he died, Parmar alleged that there was another Sikh guy in the BC area in Surrey that was involved in Babar Khalsa, whose name was Lakbir Singh Rode, and said that he was being framed by Rode. But Rode is one of those people. It's like very, very hard to figure out what his deal is. He's the head of a separatist organization called the International Sikh Youth Federation, but nothing was found to tie him in with the explosion. But his connections to RCMP are very, very murky. There's a lot of like connections to RCMP there. The other person that had connections to RCMP and CSIS was a guy named Surjan Singh Gill. He was the self-proclaimed Consul General of Khalistan in Canada, based out of Surrey, BC. But he was apparently a mole. He was a CSIS mole, and he had informed CSIS that a bomb attack was going to happen, and they sat on that report. When you read the fucking report, which I did for this fucking episode, it's like it's either a series. It's like looking in the eye of darkness, and you're like, either everyone involved in intelligence is like a fucking Marx Brothers skit, like they're just running into walls, or there's some weirder shit going on. Like, for example, there were several informants, including a white guy named Pierre Guillot or something of that name. I forget the specific name. I don't have it in my notes here. I wrote it somewhere, but I'm trying to find it. This is early episode, under the hood.
Hey.
Ideally, we'll be a lot more professional in later episodes. But this guy was like a known criminal to the RCMP. He was known for being a hitman, a sort of guy you hire to do dirty work. Apparently, he was offered $200,000 in 1984 by Parmar to build a bomb, to sneak a bomb onto a plane. And he went to the RCMP and said, "I'm not doing this, but you need to look at these people. They're considering bombing planes." And no one followed up on that. CSIS did manage to get a warrant to follow and tap into Parmar's phone. To be fair, they were using codes in the phone that were easily decipherable. Parmar also went to a place in the woods where he tested a bomb with Rayat, and the CSIS guys who followed him stayed in their car. And when they heard the bomb, they thought it was a loud gunshot, which.
It does sound like it's either Chief Wiggum or like
yeah. Oh, Ralphie! Chasing Ralph Wiggum down the street, and then the spikes show up.
Just assuming the phone call is Bart Simpson calling in Moe's Tavern. It's Amanda Hug and Kiss,
Yeah, exactly. No, it's very very dark stuff. At the end, only this guy who pled guilty to manslaughter, the mechanic who's they could nail as having built the bomb, was the guy who spent any time in prison. Parmar was killed, obviously, and then the rest were acquitted. But one of those things where you have such a chain of building the bomb, getting the bomb on it. Oh, another thing during the inquiry. So because of the repeated flagging of a potential attack on an aircraft coming in, again, one of the CSIS informants revealed that. I really want to get how stupid this is. It's pissing me off so much. One of the CSIS informants revealed that a local Sikh leader went into a Sikh Gurudwara days before the Air India attack and advised his Sikh congregants not to get on any Air India flights. This is real. This is the real version of the conspiracy theory of the Jews calling each other before 9/11. This is some real fucking.
You're having enough.
Yeah, don't go to work in the World Trade Center today.
Yeah,
I think we have an answer for your hypothetical that you posed about the Canadian Intelligence Service. I think we have an answer there.
I mean, they are Arsler, bad, whatever you want to call them, but they're so. It's hard to. It's like if there's a slider, if I'm making a video game character and there's a slider, it's hard for this Canadian intelligence to decide how much of it is evil and how much of it is incompetence.
Yeah.
And it's both. Obviously, it's both. Another thing, for example, oh god, this episode really fucking hilarious. Because of the levels of flagging, the Canadian police decide to increase security in airports. So they have police in Toronto Airport and Montreal Airport. Montreal was Mirabel at the time, and Toronto, I believe, was Pearson, but I could be wrong. I think Pearson wasn't built yet. Anyways, the Toronto airport, whatever it is, they have increased police presence, and they're doing X-ray scans on every luggage that goes in, including the luggage for connecting flights. And for some reason, on the day of the bombing, the X-ray machine in Toronto was broken. Okay, red flag number one. So they're doing a different type of check for explosives. That is like, that check where they check for noises in a bag. Like they have like a machine that detects noises in a bag. So they're checking noises, and apparently they're instructed, the local schmucks are instructed that if a bag has a bomb, it will make loud, slow noises like beep, beep, beep. So
the machine itself, or the noise it's finding.
Yeah, well, no, the machine itself will detect.
Okay, so like an alarm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they're using the machine, and the bag with the bomb, like there's a high certainty to the bag that they had the bomb in it. The machine does beep, 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 lower volume, faster alarm. And the police are like, we weren't instructed of what that volume meant, so we just let it go through.
My God, you're a security officer. Like, it's a red flag. What?
Yeah, at the very least, it gives you right to like open up the bag and see what's going on in there.
It's like a military parade. The Chinese military parade with the flags. Like, you're a security officer. You have one job.
Have either
like
of
the
you
context
read...
of like loud, like beep beep beep, like that means it's like Homer Simpson's "everything is okay" alarm. It's like in any context in life, if you hear like beep 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 beep, you kind of go, oh shit, should probably look at that.
Have either of you read the Lawrence Wright book, The Looming Tower?
No, I haven't.
It's really good. I think he does really well when it comes to like primary sources and facts, but he does a classic liberal bait and switch where like his conclusion, or what he extrapolates, is that what really allowed 9/11 was bad communication between the CIA and the FBI. That like it was all like oopsies, and like, oh, if only they talked more with each other, if only the information was shared in a more effective way. And it's like, at what point like do you like say that people weren't doing their jobs because they were told not to do their jobs?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and again,
you can't keep assigning. You know that phrase that at some point, like ignorance
never
is
ascribe to malice
malicious?
that which incompetence it can explain.
No, but at beyond a certain point, ignorance is malicious in of itself, right?
Yes.
Like you can be that dumb.
Willful blindness.
So so I my reaction to that sort of thing, and I think of like several cases involving the police in this country, where the excuse is, we're just really, we fucked up. That's the sort of take. And you say to them, you're a security officer. Your training is specifically designed to get around the vagaries of human stupidity.
Also,
for the reason,
to the victims' families, like to the 331 victims and their families, like, does it really matter if it was an oopsie or like
exactly
deliberate? I mean, sure, it matters in the legal sense and that what you charge whom, but like the people are dead, their families are like fucking shattered, and like it just trickles down from there. Like it's one of those like really, really sad stories, really fascinating stories, and also like blowback, right? Like every intelligence agency thinks that they can put a leash on some insurgency or some nationalist group or some like local militia or like criminal enterprise, like the fucking Hell's Angels. Like I get, one of the episodes we're going to do in this show is the mass shooter in Nova Scotia who like for 12 hours was just driving around shooting people. And it turns out before he went and shot people, he withdrew $200,000 from a bank account that was like earmarked for informants for the RCMP.
So I remember reading a bit about that. Yeah, that'd be fascinating.
That drove me insane. I was like looking into the eye of madness like thing. But in the meantime, the insurgency continued for a while, but it sort of petered out because of a combination of multiple things. First of all, the end of history, right? Like the moment has changed. Like the post-Soviet collapse meant that everyone was now, a liberal capitalist. The Khalistanis, like the hardcore ones, were either shot in a series of assassinations led by the Indian state, a sort of campaign of targeted assassinations. The other ones were sort of absorbed into the state. The last big violent thing was 1995. A Punjab chief minister, Beyond Singh, was assassinated by the KCF for being a collaborationist, the Khalistan Commando Force. But it just sort of petered out. The Canadian government sort of ended up with a sort of rapprochement, the Harper government with Manmohan Singh in the early 2010s. However, because these things, sleeping dogs never lie, etc., and so on. The guys who were involved in this, they're all acquitted except for that one guy. But these things, like, they sort of bleed into the future, right? Which is India and Canada today and the diplomatic tension, right? Because going back to the opening of the episode, I mentioned that this is the assassination of these Sikh Canadian by Indian intelligence is part of a broader campaign by a new nationalist India, Modi's India, to assert itself on a global scale. And part of that was settling scores with Sikh nationalists. The second guy who was killed, or rather the first chronologically, but the second guy I mentioned in the episode, Ripudaman Singh Malik, was one of the guys who was tried and acquitted in the Air India bombings. He was shot in his car by guys involved in organized crime, but clearly there's R8W involvement there. And then this tension is escalating today in Canada to the point where earlier this year we had race riots of our own outside of Toronto and Brampton when an Indian temple had hosted some consular officials for its celebration of Holi, Diwali. Sorry, for its celebration of Diwali. They brought in some consular officials from the Indian consulate in Toronto, and the consular officials were not directly implicated with assassination of these Sikh Gurdwara leaders, but the Canadian government did allege that the plan.
Sorry, Mo, you definitely have to say that line again.
So the consular officials that were invited this year to this temple, they themselves, we don't know, like there was no accusations towards them, but the Canadian government alleges that the plans to assassinate the two Sikh Gurdwara leaders came from within the Indian consulate in Toronto. So like there's a connection there. So the Sikhs, obviously, once this claim was made public, they went down to the Diwali event in the temple, the Hindu Sabha Mandir temple in Brampton, and there was just mob violence between Sikh guys and Hindu guys, with using flag staffs to whack one another. Apparently, there was an off-duty Sikh cop in the Sikh crowd whacking in Hindu guys.
Oh my god!
He's on which is very stupid to get yourself identified if you're an off-duty cop.
Right? Yeah.
Riot. But yeah, it's bleeding in. Canada is like the relation with India has soured. Pierre Poilievre is promising that we're gonna reevaluate our relationship with Canada, with India, etc., and so on. But really, it's like these things. Once you let them out of, it's like Pandora's box, right? It really is Pandora's box. Like the sins of intelligence will be with us forever. Like it really will taint us forever.
Absolutely. Hey, just quickly, as like a complete digression, but just because you told that story about the off-duty cop, like with the flag stuff, wailing on that guy, there's this great story from the anti-Vietnam War protests in the 70s it almost sounds a little bit too good to be true, so it's probably a bit apocryphal like most good stories are, but this police officer is like beating the living daylights out of this kind of hippie long-haired student protester anti-Vietnam War guy, and the anti-Vietnam War kid just puts up his fists in defiance and says, like, long live the proletariat. And the cop just says to him, I am the proletariat. And just starts like wailing on him.
Was there anything as damaging to the left, whatever can be conceived of as a left in the US, as like the hippies, right? Like
Well, yeah, the one of the founders of like the Yippies, like the OG like anti-Vietnam War kind of guys and the big hippie protesters that tried to make the Pentagon levitate and stuff. I think it's Ari, I can't remember his last name, he was Jewish. He like of course naturally like later in life just went like hard right.
Yeah, classic.
Didn't he go to Wall Street? Wasn't he a Wall Street guy?
I honestly my brain's
think
kind
it
of
was something like
out.
that. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like the pipeline of like youthful radical to arch conservative.
Yeah, the radicalism that is sort of number one, it's in the empire itself, right? So that is like an important distinction. And then number two is sort of like that. What's that card in Monopoly? Get out of jail free card in their back pocket of having like secure, stable, middle class boomer parents, and that sort of like if you got really really crazy and you had to like you fell on your ass, like it was a soft landing. You would not spend 30 years on Robben Island if things went really badly wrong. So I'm always people don't like it when I say this, but I'm sorry, like it's true. Like I think that eventually we simply are going to have to like confront climate change on a mass movement level. Like it's clear that I'll go back to my earlier comment about the NC in the 1940s. Like it's very clear that this letter writing, petitioning bullshit isn't working, and I definitely think that the radicalism, whatever form that will take, I'm not advocating for anything or offering an answer. Yeah, I'm just like observing trends. Whatever shape that will take, it'll come from the Caribbean, it'll come from the South Pacific, it'll come from Africa, places where climate change is like actually got people by the throat, rather than where climate change is like, hey guys, eventually the hurricane will hit here. Eventually northern Germany will flood too. Those are not the people who will. I know this is a wild tangent, but you'll find I'm gonna rant about this quite a lot as we go along on this show. But like that radicalism from people who have genuinely nothing to lose versus people who have like an email job career to lose, like it's very different.
Yeah.
I agree.
Sorry for the digression.
No, it's okay.
That was so fascinating. Yeah.
I agree to an extent, Sip. I think I'm not a Maoist third worldist by any means, but you're right in that I do agree that part of that radicalism needs to come from the people who are facing consequences the most immediately. But I think in terms of like the West, broadly speaking, my friend coined this term Treatlerite, right? I don't know if you saw, I've been tweeting about it a lot. It's one of my favorite new term, yeah. The Treatler thesis.
Hang on, your friend coined it?
Yeah, posting _forever on Twitter. She has a talent for like coming up with like very catchy phrases. So she called it the Treatlerites, which is like it's a perfect encapsulation of like even like the number of Americans and Canadians and Brits for that matter, who like as long as you have DoorDash and Amazon Prime and Netflix on TV. Like, they don't care if the bodies are lining up, like, mountain high in, like, Bangladesh or whatever. Just make sure the fucking treats keep coming. They want their treats. They love their treats.
Yeah.
And to that response, I think whatever progress can be made in the imperial core, in the belly of Treatler Reich, I think it has to be a vanguard. It has to be a very disciplined vanguard with like, a willingness almost to, or no compunctions to like apply violence on like a Bolshevik level scale or a Maoist level scale. And I'm not saying it because I'm enjoying it or I live vicariously through it, but like
no. As we said, we're observing trends. We're not making policy suggestions.
I look at all of my coworkers who love their fucking treats, who love their Amazon Prime, like the type of people who like if a delivery was late by one day, they're going to shoot someone.
Please don't get me started on this bourgeois nonsense that I have to read on social media every now and then about what is the appropriate behavior to expect from your indentured servant from the app.
Your slave, yeah.
Oh, don't get me started. Anyways.
Just my very quick. So, like, what happens next with Canada and India? Are they just going to do like the expel the diplomats, bring them back quietly in a year, and pretend
they've done
fine?
that already? But it's escalating again in terms of immigration. So India, just this week actually, India accused Canada of not protecting not protecting. India basically said that Canada is corrupt because Indian students are using the Canadian student visa to go to Canada and then sneak across the border to America to apply for asylum or to try and get a green card.
HB1.
The
Indian visa a choice.
Not six, just Indians in general.
Oh, I see.
They're just India's accusing Canada of corruption with regards to its immigration program. The Canadian government is accusing India of the same corruption with regard because the big right now the big salient issue in Canada is immigration, specifically Indians. Right, like Indians are taking the brunt of the anti-immigration sentiment, the feeling.
Am I just oblivious or naive? But like, what the hell happened? Why is it suddenly Indians? Like, it used to be people from the Americas, like, the Mexicans or Guatemalans or whatever.
Well, in the case of Canada, they're just the visible minority, right? They're the ones that work all the service industry jobs. They're all the Uber drivers and the Tim Hortons attendants and whatever. And they do that because they come and they get exploited because they work under the table for lower wages or they're here and they're struggling. Obviously, everyone's struggling, but they're willing to work under the table and so on, and it becomes a pool of exploitable labor.
So basically, the Irish in the 1800s and the Italians
basically,
in the 1800s and 1900s coming into the United States.
Yeah.
Damn.
Thank you for listening to Hell to Pay. Please subscribe, like, share, tell your friends, and stay tuned for more.